Hey guys, how are you? You're watching 40 Plus Noob NZ. I am a 40 plus. I am a newbie on motorcycles and I live in New Zealand, hence 40 Plus NZ. Hey look, this is my second episode. As promised, I'm loading up a review on my current motorcycle. I just wanted to run over some of the stats on the bike before we actually go out and take a look at it. So the bike is a Hyosung GV250. They call it an Aquila, which is Spanish for eagle. Hyosung has been around since 1978 as a motorcycle manufacturer. If you have in the last, because I'd like to see some motorcycle dealerships actually watching this channel, if you've owned a bike from 1978 through to 2003 that happens to have a Suzuki logo on it and it's a small displacement engine like a 250cc, the GNs, the 125s and the 250s, etc. I've got news for you. You've ridden a Hyosung. They were manufactured by Hyosung up to that period, although in 1984 they actually developed their own engine research facility. They're made in South Korea. If you have a look at South Korea now, they make some of the most reliable vehicles on the planet and they do it at a really good price. So they're kind of like Japan was 20 years ago where everyone was like, oh, buy a Toyota. And these days it's buy a Hyundai or buy a Kia. The bike that I've got now, I've put 4,200 kilometers on, thereabouts. And this bike, I'm not kidding you here, guys, I've had very little to no problems with. I had exactly two issues, one of which I sorted. I was having, and I'll tell you the story one day, but I was driving back from Auckland and the bike kept cutting out constantly. It was a bit of a scary time because it was only my second ever ride on the bike. It turns out that it was some spark plugs that needed to be done. The second thing that has happened is I've got a little bit of a hunting idle. I've done my research and it turns out that it's probably going to be a little diaphragm in the carburetor, which has perished. Now this bike is 15 years old. It's a 2005, so you've got to expect that there's going to be a few seals that are going to perish over that period of time, especially since this one was garaged for much of its life. It had only done 7,800 Ks when I bought it. That was one of the reasons why I bought this bike, because it had very low mileage on it. First things first, I want you guys to think about the fact that if you're going to own a motorcycle, you're probably going to drop it at some stage. So buying a brand new bike when you're just starting out is not necessarily a very good idea, because you're going to feel even worse if you drop a bike which is absolutely pristine. My bike isn't quite pristine, but it's close. The first owner, I think, because it's had two owners before me, I think the first owner dropped it once at some speed. You can see there's a bit of gravel rash on it. If you look carefully. I didn't see it when I first got the bike. It wasn't until I actually went to go and pick the bike up that I ended up with this issue, or seeing this issue. So at any rate, it's a 2005. It's a dual carb. The 2009 onwards of this bike is fuel injected. Now you don't get that in many 250cc motorcycles. The other thing with this one is it's the only one that I could find that was oil air cooled. Now the reason that I decided to go for oil air cooling, when I did my research, I found out that the air-cooled bikes don't like sitting in traffic for long periods of time. And I know some of the areas that I go to, you could be sitting in traffic for 15, 20 minutes just waiting to be able to get your turn to go across the lights. There are some places, when you're heading over to Whitianga, there's a place called Tairua. It's got a one-lane bridge and it's a tourist mecca. As a result of that, what you end up with is a line of traffic, could be 20, 30 kilometers long, and I didn't want to be sitting in traffic on my bike on a skinny little road. It's quite risky to actually overtake because the roads are so narrow, they just fit 2 cars through them. But you can be sitting there for 15, 20 minutes, half an hour, 3/4 of an hour, just waiting to get across this bridge. And I didn't want an air-cooled bike just sitting there ticking along, getting hotter and hotter and hotter and hotter. At least with the oil air cooling, there's about another 800 mils of oil circulating through the machine, which means that it's going up to a radiator, it's cooling down a bit and going back down into the sump again. So it's helping to keep the engine cool. It's helping to keep all of your rings and seals and bearings and everything cooler, and it's helping to keep the viscosity of the oil so that it's doing its job properly. I know that was really long-winded, but it's something that you guys need to know. I'm an engineer by trade. I used to make jet units for boats. I've made everything from hips and knees through to hydraulic systems through to stuff that floats around in space. So when it comes to lubrication is extremely important in your engine. Look for something that's going to fit your needs. If you're only commuting 5 minutes backwards and forwards to work each day, that's not going to be an issue for you. But if you intend to use your bike for longer trips, look for something that's going to give that bike a little bit of extra cooling. That's my recommendation to you. So, at any rate, this is a 250cc cruiser. It's a V-twin. It's dual carb. I was a bit disappointed because I did actually want the fuel injected version of it, but the price couldn't whinge. $2,200 New Zealand is around about $1,600 US for a bike that was not quite pristine, but pretty close. The ratings that I found online were 3.5 stars up to 5 stars. There was a couple of 1-star ratings for people that had had some electrical issues on the bike. I've not had any issues with it. The guy before me hadn't had any issues with it, and he owned it for, the better part of around about 10 years, I think. But most of it was 3.5 to 5-star ratings, or worked out as an average of about 74.8 out of 100 as far as the ratings went. Brand new, these bikes go for around about 7,500 New Zealand dollars if you can find one. Nausea Motorcycles in the South Island will get them in for you if you want one. But there's not currently any North Island stockists for Hyosung in New Zealand. They do have an online store, which means that you can go out and buy your parts and what have you from their New Zealand online store, and it's shipped overnight. So they're pretty good about that kind of thing. It's a 249cc. You'll find that most of the bikes don't, same as cars, if they say it's a 2 litre, it's probably actually a 196 litre or something like that. Sorry, I'm looking at my notes. So it's a V-twin 4-stroke. It produces 26.82 horsepower or 19.6 kilowatts at 9,200 RPM. It's 21.3 newton meters of torque. It has a top speed of 130 kilometers an hour, which is 80.8 miles per hour. The compression ratio is 11.2 to 1. The bore stroke is 57 by 48.8 or 2.2 by 1.9 inches. The valves are 4 per cylinder, so it runs on 8 valves, and it's oil air cooled. It actually shifts quite nicely. Most people that actually ride it, even if they've ridden intruders and boulevards and things like that in the past, all go, it's pretty nippy for a 250, and they are quite nippy for a 250. Here in New Zealand, small to mid-engine bikes are kind of where we're at because of fuel costs and other things. There are a lot of people out there that own Harley Davidsons and what have you, but it's usually a weekend bike. It's not usually something that they take on the road every day. And saying that, I'm probably going to get people trolling me saying, well, I have a Harley Davidson and I ride it every day to work. Well, maybe you do, but the majority of people here in New Zealand have small to mid-sized bikes because of fuel costs and oil costs and all the other bits and pieces. It cost me $1.76.9 for my gas. during the COVID-19 crisis, and as we all know, fuel price has gone. So as a result of that, we have had a lot of drop in prices, normally about $2.20 a litre. At the moment it's $1.76, so it's costing me around about $23 or $24 to be able to fill my 14-litre tank, which is another one of the stats. So it's oil air-cooled instead of just air-cooled. I highly recommend that. Sorry, I'm moving you guys because you're actually helping me to hold the piece of paper. Transmission is 5-speed. Front suspension is telescopic. And it's a swing arm with dual spring shocks in the back. It's got a drum brake at the back. It's got a dry weight of 170 kgs. This is the heaviest bike in its class. That's 374.8 pounds, and that's dry weight. So by the time you put 14 litres of fuel in it and then go and put another 1.8 litres of oil in it, you're probably going to be looking at about 185 to 187 kgs, or around about 400 pounds. So it's not a light bike. But the centre of gravity on this bike, because the seat is only 700 millimetres in height, or 27.6 inches, means that you're not going to... It's easy to pick up. It's easy to move around. I can just balance it between my legs when I'm standing at the lights if I want to stand up. I can flat foot it. I'm 6 foot. I can flat foot it without any problems at all. And I'm pretty sure that if you were about 5 foot, you could probably still flat foot this bike. I have a 32-inch inseam, so it gives you some idea of what that bike's going to look like. It's an electric start. So like I say, 14-litre fuel tank, or 3.7 gallons. In the 2005, they came in red and black, or they came in silver and black. They're a double overhead cam. So instead of it being like most of the 250s are a single overhead cam, this one runs a double overhead cam. From looking at all the stats, I don't know that it makes a heck of a lot of difference as to speed or anything like that. It's probably a little bit torquier than being double overhead cam, and having more valves per cylinder probably means that it gets from 0 to 100 a little bit quicker than some of these other bikes, but the top speeds all end up around about the same because you've still got the same engine displacement. So like I said to you guys, I wanted cheap, so I'm going to talk to you guys about insurance. I wanted to have insurance for the bike because if I end up hitting a car or whatever, if it gets stolen, I want somebody to be able to pay me some money to be able to get another one. So the insurance on this bike is $7 a week. That's the cost of a cup of coffee. You could probably shop around and get it a little bit cheaper. I just got it through my bank. And that's for a learner. So once you actually get up to your full license, so learner restricted is about $7. Once you get up to your full license, it probably comes down to about $5 or $6 a week. Now it does 420 kilometers on a tank, which works out to be 3.3. I know this because I've tested it. 3.33 litres per 100 Ks. It works out to be, I think that's 67 miles a gallon. Don't quote me on that. Now I did 400 kilometers on the tank, and it putted out just as I got into the service station. And you're looking at probably 20 kilometers in the reserve tank. So it's going to be pretty close to 420 Ks per tank. Reasons for this over a top four. Top four being Kawasaki, Suzuki, Honda, and Yamaha. The reasons for this being your first bike is one, price. You're not going to get a bike that's cheaper than this. Two, it's made in Korea. These days, South Korean vehicles are some of the most reliable on the planet. If you own a Suzuki from 1978 to 2003, it's probably a Hyosung. So you know that the reliability is there, that the build quality is there, because a lot of those bikes are actually still cruising around now. So what I'm going to do now is we're already heading up to nearly 15 minutes of this. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to head up and show you guys some of the stats on some of the other bikes. So Suzuki 250cc Intruder, single overhead cam, 3 valves, 248cc, 10.5 to 1 compression ratio, air cooled only, 24 horsepower, 5 speed, suspension's the same, brakes are the same, seat height is 685 millimeters, so you're looking at 15 millimeters difference in height. So virtually nothing. Weight is a little bit less, so they're 159 kgs dry versus 170 kgs. So you're looking at 11 kgs less. That might make a difference to you guys if you're weighing 9,500 kgs. I'm an 84 kg guy at the moment, so my weight probably offsets somebody who's a little bit heavier. The tank, which was the primary reason why I wouldn't select this bike, it's only 12 litres. I need the extra couple of litres. Some of the rides that I do, there's no service stations for 300 k's. If there's no service station for 300k, then I need a bike that's going to be able to do more than 300 k's. The Suzuki Intruder, I can't guarantee that. So top speed 130k an hour. Some people are saying that they do 150. Please remember that your speedo is going to be out by at least 10 kilometers an hour, and it may be actually exponential. So the faster you go, the worse it is. It's pretty typical for Suzuki's in my research and talking to mechanics from Suzuki, etc. The price, they're going to start at around about $3,000. Bearing in mind that my bike was only $2,200. They start at $3,000. Now the one that I found at $3,000 had done 15,000 k's. Mine had only done 7,800 k's. It had no current woof and no current registration on it, so you're going to have to pay the extra on those. Honda Rebel 234cc. This is the worst out of all of the bikes as far as the stats go. I know that a lot of Americans say, Honda Rebel is what they started out on. They're a 234cc, top speed of 127 kilometers an hour, so you're going to miss out on 3k an hour, which can make a difference. Single overhead cam, 2 valves per cylinder, so it's going to take a wee while to get to speed. 139 kg, so it is one of the lightest bikes that I had a look at. 9.8 litre tank, 9.2 to 1 compression ratio. So it's not as highly strung as the other two bikes, so it's not going to get up off its backside as quickly. It's only 12 kilowatts. You're looking at 12 newton meters of torque versus 19 newton meters of torque for the Hyosung. It's a 5-speed, the same as the others. It's got the same brakes, the same suspension setups. The seat height is another little bit lower again. It's 676 millimeters seat height now, and it's also only air cooled. The only price I could find was in a 1996, which actually had to have new seals put through the bike. It had done 46,000 k's, but it was $1,800 for that bike. I wouldn't want something like that, not unless I wanted a project bike. The Yamaha Virago, or the Dragster, is 249cc. This is probably the industry leader. 249cc, air-cooled single overhead cam. So if you're sitting in traffic for long periods of time, please remember, keeping your oil cool is a priority here, guys. Weight 137 kg, so it's actually the lightest bike in its class. Now it's got a 9.5 litre tank on it, which is too small for me, but it might be okay for you guys. However, it is a little bit cheaper to run. It's only 3 litres per 100 k's. You can probably put that down to the fact that it's the lightest bike in its class. It's a 10.1 compression ratio, 5-speed. The suspension's the same as the Hyosung. The brakes are the same as the Hyosung. There's a little bit more adjustability in the suspension at the front than what the Hyosung's got, but you're probably not going to be dealing with that. I couldn't find a price on it because I couldn't find one at the moment under the COVID-19. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to take you out and I'm going to show you what the Hyosung actually looks like, so you can assess for yourself whether the aesthetics on that look good enough for you to go and take a look at. I think it's a great bike. I've been riding it for 4 months, but I haven't got anything to really compare it to because I didn't test ride any other bikes. This one fit all of my criteria, and it didn't have any major garks or anything on it. So that was it for me. I was going to pick that bike. So at any rate, I'm going to take you out and show you the bike now. Okay guys, so here is the bike. This is, as you can see, it's nicely chromy. It's not a new bike. You will see some little bits of rust here and there, just mainly on the suspension, etc. But it's in pretty good nick all up for $2,200. Now if you take a look here, this is where I discovered, this is the first thing that I noticed that might have had a bit, that it might have had a bit of a knock. And if you go up to the wing mirror, you can see there's a couple of little scratches just here. And then if you go around to this side here, you'll see that there's a little bit of a chip out of the glass here. And then if you come down here and you look really carefully, you'll see that there is some scratches here and some scratches here. Apart from that, this bike is pretty well pristine. So the bike's pretty well pristine. You can see that single disc brake on the front, that will stop you relatively quickly. It doesn't have a steel braided line, although the newer versions do. I would probably recommend going and getting the new one if you can afford it. But in the meantime, this bike does me just fine. So like I say, I've got a 6-foot frame. I sit on it okay. I will say that I sit right hard up against the back of the seat here, and I think that it could do with being another inch or two longer if I had the ability to do so. So at any rate, that's the bike. That concludes this episode. The next episode we're going to get out hopefully and go for a bit of a ride. I also want to talk to you about gear. So it's either going to be about gear or being able to go out for a ride. At this current point in time, I can't get out there because of COVID-19. We're on lockdown until next week, and even then it'll be essential travel only to and from work. So at any rate, I hope that you guys have an amazing day. Keep the rubber side down. Leave any comments or questions that you have in the description below. I'll get to as many as I possibly can. You guys have a great one. Take care. Bye.